right, here we go.
Welcome to Come and See, your podcast for finding truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. With host and founder Richard Case and co-host and retreat leader Kathy Ricconi. Today is our special guest day, where we will hear from a friend of the ministry who will share their insight and stories on truth in this chaotic world. And now your host, Richard Case.
Well, good morning, everybody. This is guest day, and we have two fabulous guests, Ned and April, from the East Coast. Where you guys actually, what's your town that you live in?
We live in a village called Wickford, Rhode Island, and we say to people it's across the bay from Newport. Everyone seems to know Newport, so we're right on the bay in Rhode Island.
Do you guys go to the Newport very often?
Yes, we're 15 minutes from Newport.
In fact, the house we live in is
fun.
a block away from where April grew up. So this is an interesting situation to be married to someone that people still think of her as little April, the 10-year-old blonde walking around town.
Yeah.
That is a true statement. It's weird to be treated like a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
For sure.
There's still some of the same neighbors in the neighborhood and everything as well.
Yes.
That's so sweet.
Absolutely.
I love it.
Yeah, Newport. We love Linda and I love Newport. We love visiting the mansions there. This is where all the mansions from the 1800s are still existing, and you can tour them. So it's a magnificent place, and just walking along the ocean there is fabulous. So it's a beautiful place, and we're excited. Ned and April are good friends. From the East Coast. They attended a retreat many years ago, and they've learned to abide and give it away. And April and Ned both can share a little bit about their giving it away, particularly April. You've spoken at C12 events, haven't you?
I have. Yes. And I spoke at Iron Sharpens Iron for women, and yes, so I've done some speaking.
Yeah. Famous. April's famous, right, Ned?
I will say April and Ned are two of my favorite people, so I'm excited to have them on here.
In my business life, I have my office in downtown Providence, and in Providence, I'm very well known, and when I get down to Wickford, I become Mr. April. Maybe not the calendar, but I'm Mr. April.
That's great.
Yeah, and your business is you're in accounting. How long have you been with that firm there in Rhode Island?
Forever. I started when I graduated college in 1977. I started working in downtown Providence for a small firm. Left there after 3 or 4 years. Went to another small firm. Left there after 5 years. Not quite 30 years old, and started my own business.
Yeah.
And 3 years later, merged that into the firm that I started with. And then 2.5 years ago, merged into a 1,000-person firm headquartered predominantly in New York and New Jersey.
Yeah.
So it's been quite a ride.
Yeah, and you're a tax specialist, right?
My specialty is in private clubs, tax and consulting related to that.
Yeah.
So we've grown our practice to be third largest in the country that handles private clubs. We're predominantly on the East Coast, but I've got some clubs in the middle of the country in San Francisco and recently one in Hawaii. So it's
nice.
It's going national.
If you need a friend to go with you on, if you and April would like to go visit that one and bring Dan and I along,
Stand in line,
free to
stand in
invite.
line,
We'll
Kathy.
jump
Take a
in.
number.
Kathy, you're such a good friend.
I know, right?
Did you ever do the Chicago Yacht Club?
Yes, that's a new client as well. We that worked out really well. The whole very interesting. The first year client for us, and the whole thing was remote. So I've yet to go out there, but they've made it a point that this year they expect us to be out there on site. So easy to get a flight out there. So that'll be an interesting jaunt.
Yeah. Well, when we were in Chicago, we were members of the Chicago Yacht Club, and
You told me that, yeah.
so it was always fun to go down there right on the lake and go boating and just enjoy. They have a beautiful club there, and they ran it really well, so we really enjoyed it. Well, as we have you share a little bit about your life, why don't you each, if you could, share with us how you came to know Christ. April, we'll start with you. Tell the audience how you came to know Christ.
It was not a straight line by any means. We were raised in a family that really didn't have faith. I had a grandmother who was Episcopalian, and my brother and I would go to church with her occasionally, but our parents were not churchgoers. And, fast forward to I got married in my first marriage in 1989, and my brother was in the US Navy and was out in Washington State, and he became saved. He found Christ. And there's only the two of us, and we're very close. We're 10 months apart, and he got on an airplane and flew to New Hampshire, where I was living at the time, to share the gospel with me.
Wow.
And I threw him out of my house. So that is how it started with me. I could not see it. Just thick scales, had no idea, thought he had lost his mind. And 10 years later, I had a dear friend in this neighborhood, in the house that we're in. I bought as a single mom. I was divorced and was in a bidding war with people from Long Island. And that woman was Mary Capabianco, and she ended up leaving me alone and going and buying a home on the water. We were across the street from the water, and we became fast friends. And she was raised as a Catholic and definitely was seeking, but again, I was not. But I really enjoyed her. We had a lot of great conversations, and we were walking along this neighborhood one day. I can still see the spot. Neither of us are believers. And she was lamenting how she missed Long Island and why was she here? Like, she just was really struggling with why she was in Rhode Island. And I said out of nowhere, because you're supposed to bring me to Christ. And we both stopped in her tracks, and she said, why would you say that to me? And I'm like, I don't know. And it was about a year and a half later, Mary Cap brought me to Christ. So she went first and then me. And we have been tremendous friends. And so that is really, it was a slower process over that year when she became a Christian. I could hear her and the scales just started coming off. And I can't give you an exact date. Sure. It was just one day. It was just, of course.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Of course.
What a beautiful story.
Wow.
Yes.
That's cool. How many years ago was that?
2000.
2000.
Yeah, not 2,000 years ago.
2,000 years ago.
The year 2000.
Yeah, we figured that. Ned, how about you?
I grew up in Massachusetts, Irish Catholic, second of 6 kids. Mom and dad were very religious Catholic. You walked in our house, there would be a picture of the Pope and a picture of President Kennedy. President Kennedy might be a little bit higher on the wall. Just barely. So my Catholic school, grade school, Catholic high school, church every Sunday, every holy day, altar boy, all of the above. Really came to Christ when it was the first abiding retreat that we went to with you, Rich, and
2015.
In 2015, and honestly, I was brought along kicking and screaming. Didn't want to go. And Rich, if you remember this, at the last day, we all go down to the chapel, and you said every couple come to the front of the church and give what was your goal for the weekend. And
I do remember this, yeah.
And I stood up and I was completely honest and forthcoming and said, my goal for the weekend was not to leave early and alone. And
And that was news. That was news to his wife. That was even in his mind.
Yeah,
I had a
because
backup
Ned,
plan.
you had an escape plan, right?
I had an escape plan. I absolutely did. And to think back on it now, I mean, even this Sunday when we were at our worship church, we were singing a Tom Ewing song. I cannot sing a Tom Ewing song without crying.
Yeah.
I just flat out get so
I
emotional
love it.
because he was very involved
Mhm.
in my life that weekend.
Hmm.
So that's my background.
Yeah.
But I think it's an interesting one to note too for us. Ned and I were married in 1999, and I was a woman without any faith. And in 2000, I became saved and became what you would call a fire hose Christian. And I was
And the fire hose was aimed at me.
I was anything but soft or kind to Ned in that transition. And he finally said to me one day, who do you think you are? Speaking to me like this. And it really stopped me in my tracks. And I decided, it takes me a little while, but I decided to leave it in Jesus's hands.
Yeah.
And just pray.
That's always
and
better.
For me to zip it. And just, that was 15 years of prayer
Right.
Wow.
for Ned.
Yeah.
And we had a lot of years where we would leave the house on a Sunday morning, and April would go to Christ Church, and I would go to the local Catholic church. This went on for years. And one Sunday, April came home and she said, I don't know if this matters to you, but everybody at church thinks I'm single. So the next weekend, I started going to church with April.
Good move there, Ned. Well,
I may be dumb, but I'm not stupid.
that's it. Tell us, how did you two meet and then decide to get married? What happened? Tell us about that story.
We met on August 12th, 1997. And it was a fundraising networking party that I was invited to, and April by the same friend was invited to, and that's when I first met April. Took my breath away, and I said to myself, just keep breathing and don't say anything stupid.
Well, that didn't happen.
I did say a couple of stupid things.
Because at the time I was engaged to somebody else.
Oh, wow.
And there's two funny parts to this story. Ned's firm name was Bachelor, Frechette, McRory, and Michael. And I was at the time an investment broker, and I was networking often with one of the women in his office. And I used to send her mail I used to say Bachelor, Frechette, and Michael. And she said, you always leave McRory out. I said, he's probably some old geezer. Like, why does it matter? Like, the name is so long. So when I meet Ned, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the guy whose name I never put on any of our mailings. But the part the part that we laugh about the most is not only did he say this to me, but he was surrounded by people at the end of the night when I was leaving. He said, I just have one question for you. Is this engagement thing really going to happen? I was like, who says that? I was like, yes. And here we are. So,
wow.
Ned, you were prophetic and you didn't know it.
Very true, Kathy. Very true.
Yes.
But in that next year, we became fabulous friends. We would talk all the time. We would have almost a regularly scheduled Friday afternoon phone conversation where talk about what we're going through, what we do on the weekend, etc.
Well, I was starting a business. I had left investments and was starting the marketing firm. And so I never started a business. He was a CPA. The woman that had invited us was an attorney. So we were constantly having conversations about what I had to think about. What was I doing? We joke that Ned was dating all of Rhode Island at the time. So it was just, we were both golfers. We were in the same circle. So we became friends. So when I ended up actually the engagement broke off, Ned showed up and said, I think we should date. And I said, I can never date you. Like you're one of my best friends. Like that can't go backwards. Like we'll lose that, you know? And he was persistent, and we were married, I think, a year and 2 months later.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
So you dated 98 and then got married in 99, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, that's pretty exciting. And what is your family like now? What's your children like? And
Well, as part of that, you can speak to that. But when we got to, I lost my train of thought.
as your children,
I'll jump in. You can jump in. When Ned and I were married, I had 2 children, Alex, our son, who was 9 at the time, and our daughter, Kate, who was 7. And Ned had never had children of his own. So
I had been married before, but no children. And one of my buddies was fond of saying that I went prefab, walking right into the family,
the ready-made
dynamic situation.
family.
Yeah.
And that was a big transition. Ned lived in Providence. We lived in this house that I'm in right now.
Half an hour away.
So a half hour away. The kids and I had lived in this home by ourselves for almost 6 years. And so Ned moved into our space. And that was the first year we ended up in counseling, trying to deal with all of what that means to bring that together.
Right.
And that was a real blessing for us to have someone help us walk through that transition.
Yep. And you've just recently remodeled a lot of your house, haven't you?
We added an addition off the back of the house. Really, I think we took it from the teenage years into what it means to be an adult in a home. So we've added an ensuite upstairs for friends to come and stay with us, and expanded we do a lot of entertaining, and our dining room was smaller. So expanded our dining room to be able to have lots of people around the table.
Yeah.
Oh, how wonderful.
And Ned, you invented a outdoor game, right?
Well, kind of. I took washer toss and made so many changes on it. I took a great thing and perfected it. And we found that when we were camping, we heard the people next to us, the clinking of the washers, etc. And we figured that out, and we've taken it to an extreme where I've made a couple hundred of these games now.
Yeah.
And we have an annual, our 10th annual fundraiser is coming up. We'll raise over $20,000 playing this funny little game in a March Madness bracket type situation, and everybody pays $100 to be a team. Every dollar raised goes to benefit the North Kingstown Food Pantry. And they'll be the first ones to tell you we've become a line item on their budget for the year. And if ever we chose to stop doing this, would like us to give them at least a year notice so they can wean off the but it's become a cult classic. It seems like everything revolves around Nedlywinks, the people, the friendships that have formed, the bonding, the competition, and doing God's work with feeding the hungry. It's fabulous.
I love it.
Describe
Nedlywinks.
Describe that game a little bit. What is that game? Because we have one. You sent one to us.
Picture a wooden box, 17 inches square, with a toilet flange in the middle of it. And there's two of these boxes. One of the changes I made was to put a rope in between. So the front of each box is exactly 10 feet away from the other box, stand behind, try to get points by doing that.
Yeah.
And as April's fond of saying, somewhere there's in the Home Depot in corporate headquarters is saying, who is this guy and why is he buying 400 toilet flanges from us over the years? But the beautiful thing about it is whether you're old or young, male or female, it's not like horseshoes where you've got a heavy, it's a very light thing. And frankly, the young children are a
Pretty
lot
good.
better at it than
Pretty good.
the
Yeah.
old
And
folks.
do you is it sold online or anything like that, or it has to be we have to know you and
We
say,
still have
hey,
we
we
still
want to
have a
order some
website,
Nedley
right?
wings?
The website isn't up at the moment, but Ned makes them, still makes them by hand. And so
Okay.
we certainly can get you. There's
The
many
Riccone
C12
clan
members.
would love to be
Yes.
on the
Rich
wait
has-
list.
you have a game,
to order
Rich?
some
We do,
Nedley
yeah,
wings.
we do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Our family plays
And-
it. We really love it.
And Kathy too, I think Dan, we're doing our next Nedley Wings tournament is coming up September 25th. So many C12 members will be down. So if you're in driving
Very
distance
fun.
and would love to come, you could see the craziness.
Ned, I do
That's great.
I do fundraising with it as well. I charge my kids and grandkids to play it.
That's fabulous.
Yeah.
I love
Well,
it.
as we know that you attended abiding retreat. Share a little bit, each of you, about your personal experience with abiding. What does that look like, and what has it meant to you? And April, we can start with you.
I remember it was the fall of 2015, October is when we first came up, and it's one of those marks in your life where I can say I was never the same.
Yeah.
It just completely changed my perspective of a relationship with the Lord and how to read the word, and the fact that God cares enough about me and my path and why he has me here. But I think it's also been amazing to me how it's still such a journey. I keep thinking I'm going to get really good at this. And then I'm like, oh, I still have so much to learn.
Yeah.
So much to learn. But it has been amazing for us. We went through a major change with my business that had Ned and I and friends abiding. Rich, you came alongside with Dave Dunkel and we're abiding. Knowing that, I mean, the other light bulb moment for me, I always feel silly saying it, but I'll say it in case it hasn't occurred to anyone else. But I don't have the April version of the Holy Spirit in me. And Ned has the Ned version. We all have the same.
Right.
And if we all have the same, then we should come to unity. He's not going to be a God of confusion and start giving everyone different answers. So that is so comforting when you're up against life's questions or challenges to ask another believer. So there's even in C12 sitting around the table, there are abiders, and those are the folks that I know I'm really listening to because they're seeking the Holy Spirit too. So it's just been a tremendous game changer. We taught abiding. We did the video series recently with some folks. Was such a blessing. The amazing part to do a full circle is my mom came
Oh,
to
did
the
she
abiding
really?
and has just been such an absolute joy to watch her start to have the scales come off her eyes. And she'll still say, I don't understand it. I'm always confused, but I know that the Lord is moving and she's willing. So it was a life-changing moment in October of 2015, but still continues. And Rich, I would say every retreat we do with you, we just recently got invited to the fall. Like Rick sends an email. I don't even need to know what it's on. I just say yes. I just write back yes. Like it's like yes, we're in.
Yes.
And unlike
the first time.
Unlike the first time when
Yeah.
Ned said no, he wouldn't come with me several times. I just know that no matter when, Ned will be there.
Yeah. Yep. And Ned, how about you? How does that look like for you?
Well, it was fascinating because we're still very different steps and phases of our life and with Christ, but then it was the Grand Canyon divided us, because while growing up very Catholic and very Irish, I never read the Bible, and that weekend was absolutely the first time I had, for any length of time, read the Bible.
Right.
And through a misstep of mine in the cross-referencing, I ended up going to Psalm 23, which is the only section of the Bible that not only I knew, had read, but knew it by heart,
Yeah.
because that was something that I learned as a young boy. It was just amazing to go from that to now understanding and with my Bible, seeing dates that I'd write in the corners and remember, oh, that was 2017, that was in New Hampshire at the retreat, and or whatever it might be. So it was incredibly different. I can't think of a time in my life where I never felt that Jesus wasn't right with me, alongside me, and frankly, sometimes carrying me. But this is just it's a different level of connection.
Yeah.
And I think the beauty is, Rich, even in having conversations with you, again, just amazing, the Holy Spirit. I remember we were facing so many challenges this year, so many questions. And I remember getting up one morning, and I get up, I'm a morning person, so I'm up early. I sit in the Word, and what can be more of a challenge for me sometimes is staying in one place. That sometimes feels like I'm not making progress, so I'm trying to keep moving, and it's very much true to my personality. So learning to just kind of sit. Your homework for me on the first abiding retreat was I was to spend 6 months in Psalm 23.
Yeah.
Period. I was like, what on earth do you do in Psalm 23 for 6 months? But it was just such a game changer for me. But I think that morning when I was writing, I literally wrote in my journal, Lord, help me reconnect to what it truly means to ask, seek, and knock with you. Like, what are the steps? And then we were on a call with you that morning. We're supposed to be teaching on authority. And you say, you know what? You all have a lot of questions this morning. Let's go back and review how to ask, seek, and knock with God. I'm like, oh my gosh.
I love it.
Like if I need these reminders that God is there and for us, I see them over and over again. Not only in abiding for us as a couple, but when you are blessed enough to be surrounded by others who are also doing that.
Right.
It's really beautiful.
Right. And describe, you said ask, seek, and knock, going to unity. How does that work for the two of you? And do you have any examples of how you've done that, the process to discern God's will together as a couple?
Well, part of the steps you laid out where we went back is we actually took a separate page in our notebooks and we wrote all the questions that were before us. Ned's thinking about retirement ages and when that's going to happen. We're trying to think if I am staying where I am I called there, or is there something next? We have questions about our family. We struggle with margin. The list goes on and on of the things that the Lord could be speaking to us. So we wrote them out on our notebooks, each with a separate page. And then we came back together and agreed on the questions. Ned had a few that I didn't have. I had a few that he didn't have. So we wrote those down. And then we went away. And this is the beautiful thing that, you sometimes get overwhelmed. But then we went away and we wrote only what we knew to be facts about each of the questions. So we wrote down the facts that we knew.
Yep.
And then we got back together again. And it was just amazing. You would think the facts would be the same, but there were a couple like, oh, that's good. Like, I hadn't thought of that one. Like, that's a really good one. Or I had forgotten about that. And then we went away again. And then we wrote, what questions were we still seeking that we didn't have answers to within those? So even around like retiring, one of my questions was to, really speak to a financial planner and have someone else tell us, you're good, you're good, or this is what you need. So we wrote down all of those different things we were still seeking. And then we went after them. We went and started doing some of them. And then as we got those answers, you start seeing pieces of the questions come together, and some are clearer and some are still gray. So then you can dig into those. And I find it's what I'm learning to be, I am a type A personality. I like a structure, and I can just see Jesus smiling sometimes, just whispering, it's okay. You know, I sometimes feel like Martha, 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 you know, it's okay. And just, so some questions I stay on for weeks and other questions don't get touched.
Right.
And that used to bother me. And now I just let it be what's the top. And then going to Ned from time to time for other pieces. The part we don't do really well yet is having a regular check-in. I know we talk to friends who have that regular check-in. That's the one that always falls off. We kind of end up going off doing our stuff, and then it's like trying to remember to come back.
Yeah.
I don't know. Would you add anything to that?
I think that covers a lot of it. It was incredibly helpful to me, to us, in some business decisions that I had, particularly who I would choose to merge my firm in.
Right.
There were 4 founding partners in our firm. The other 3 at that point had already retired, and so it really was my decision. And this has happened to me a lot, where people say they hear from Jesus. I could echo that, but I don't hear his voice. I hear it in signs, and by that I mean, this one day I was driving into the office from home to Providence, half an hour, and just praying about which firm I should choose to merge in with, and I thought it was between Citron Cooperman and O'Connor Davies, and so OD and CC. And I'm praying, and a 18-wheeler passes me, and emblazoned on the back of it is Old Dominion Freight Line, and OD was prominent.
Yeah.
O'Connor Davies, Old Dominion.
Yeah.
And that was my sign. And I don't, can you cut this if you don't?
Yeah.
Because a couple of weeks later, so I took that and was starting the process of merging in with O'Connor Davies. And then several weeks, April, you haven't heard this before. Probably a month later.
Uh-oh.
I was in a restaurant looking down, and I saw the name Citron, white letters and orange background, and I thought, oh my goodness, did I misread the sign? And then I realized I was standing in the urinal. It was the little sieve down at that. So I thought, okay, I'm urinating on Citron. I think that's another sign, God. I got
it. Welcome to my world.
Yeah.
Kathy, you can cut that if you don't think it's
No, that's good. That's good.
I love it.
That's
I
the
love
truth.
it.
We love hearing the truth. Beautiful. And then how
I
did
tell you what's
on things like that, how did you guys go to unity? Did you weigh in on that, April, and have a spiritual?
April was a critical part of that, because what we had decided to do, and there were 13 firms that I had some level of discussion, others clearly more serious than others, but I had in a 3-ring binder, a page or 2 on each of all the 13. And that was April's suggestion to do that. And then she went and pulled up the website on every one of them, completely unbiased, hadn't talked to me about it, knew all my, remember that?
Well, he had a list of the things that were important to him, that he would want if he went to a firm. So I had that list. And then I was able to go out to the sites. And I was really, for me, I was more concerned about the culture and the people. And because Ned is a people person. Ned loves big. And so making sure his people were loved well. So that was what I was going. And it was very, very clear in some of those that was like, absolutely not. Like that, absolutely. Like some of them came off immediately, and we were able to sift through and do a little more digging and find articles and read. And so we came to a handful, and we're able to pray over those.
Wow. And then how did you, April, in that process, because we talk about unity, it's not just an agreement between you two. It's a spiritual confirmation of the Holy Spirit. How did that work for you two, that you both then came to a Holy Spirit, yes, we're in unity now, we confirm this, that's God's will?
I think it was a trickier time because Ned was running on ahead. And so I was constantly felt like the 3-year-old, like saying, but wait, like, wait for me. Like I was trying to, I want to get caught up, like you're off and going. So he granted me those moments when I was like, whoa, you're out again, way ahead. But there were enough signs, and I was just praying constantly for a peace. It was a really, first and foremost, it was a really hard decision for Ned to determine this was the time.
Yeah, sure.
So that was the other thing that was happening. And also the realization, Ned is the rainmaker and has been, even with his 4 partners. And so everyone else retired, and there were no rainmakers coming up behind him. So he was trying to position, he finally was the last guy standing, and so managing partner, able to lead his vision, and yet it was feeling like the time was now. So he had that person. So a lot of my prayer was praying for him to get to neutral, praying for him to not be wrapped up in either path and let the Lord lead. And that was probably where I was most involved, trying to pray that Ned was truly at the right time, the Lord's time for this.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of prayer about that. And that whole lesson about neutral, meaning you're okay with either answer,
Right.
for both of us, because I was like, this should probably happen, but me being like, the Lord's timing will be perfect. So praying for that. And it was, it seemed like it was going to be a while. It seemed like it was actually, the signs were indicating that it would be some time before it happened. And then all of a sudden, things just started moving in a really natural, seamless way. And the firm that Ned merged with really was interested in this private club practice. Where some of the firms could have cared less. They might not have even kept it necessarily, but this firm was really interested, which meant that Ned got to come in and bring value in this transition time.
Right.
And it was such a blessing to him. So it was a lot of listening to Ned and going back to the word for confirmation and asking the Lord to give me the questions to ask Ned, and making sure that I allowed enough space, because we have adult children who don't live here, but we see them a lot. And so that they're in our lives, but making sure I gave Ned enough space for him to download with me and for me to hear the questions. So I was definitely chasing, but I'm pretty persistent. I kept up, and I was asking the right questions and getting to a place where we had some real peace.
Yeah. Ned, from your perspective, how did that work for you?
Well, it worked out. The end result is fabulous. It was clearly the right decision, and it's almost 3 years ago now. It'll be the end of this year will be 3 years that we actually did the merge, and it seems like a week or a month doesn't go by where there's something that happens, where there's a decision made at the corporate level that is the same decision I would have made in my 30-person firm. I said to the managing partner of the entire firm recently, so Kevin, you've been able, I created this culture in a 30-person firm, but you've been able to have that same culture in a 1,000-person firm. It's just unheard of.
Right.
And the things that keep on happening. Very recently, 4 years ago, Kathy, you probably don't know this, and it's okay.
Sure.
I was diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, And no one up until 2 weeks ago, my partners in Providence didn't even know. Certainly the partners in New York didn't know. And April and I talked a lot about it, prayed about it, and decided it was time. So I talked to one of the partners on the executive committee that I'm very close to, and told him, and they could not have been more fabulous. It was just amazing. And it was, their reaction was, what do you want to do, Natalie? What do you want to do? We want to do what's best for you. You've been, the private club practice that April talked about when I started it 10, 12 years ago, that we had 3. I built that up to 50. We merged in, and now we're over 100.
Wow.
Everything that I've been able to do. So they're thrilled with what I've done. But it wasn't, well, we gotta talk, and we'll get back to you and see how this affects the firm. It was, how does this affect you? That was what it was all
so
about.
highly of the culture that's set up there. That's beautiful.
But I think one of the things that's really important, one of our questions we were abiding on, is when does Ned start being more public about having Parkinson's? And so we were praying and abiding. And Ned said to me one day, I feel like the Lord is telling me that I'm to be an ambassador for business people with Parkinson's. And so I said to him, that's really hard to do when you're in the closet. If God is going to use you, you have to start saying this. So again, that's what we started praying about, the time that the Lord would be so gracious to get Ned ready for that, and that he would pick the right people to tell first that would just bless him. I mean, the very first person he told at his firm, Ned told him and then paused, and he said, do you want me to do something with this information? Like, does this matter? And he said, one of my best friends has Parkinson's. Like, he's like, are you telling me because you want to do something? He said, no, I just thought I should tell you. He's like, okay. It was like, okay.
And I said, the one thing I would like you to do is talk to Kevin. Kevin Keene is the managing partner of the entire firm. And he said, okay, I'll talk to him. But I know what he's going to say. I've known him for 30 years. I know what he's going to say. He's going to say, what does Ned want to do?
Right.
What's best for Ned? So he called me back the next morning and said, I had a long conversation with Kevin late last night, and they've known each other for so long. They have that kind of relationship where they'll talk to each other at 10 o'clock at night. And just as I predicted, Kevin said, what does Ned want to do? If Ned wants to retire today, we'll make it happen. If he wants to go on the same schedule of 3 more years, we'll make that happen. What does Ned want to do? And at one point during the phone conversation, Tom said to me, because I was quiet for a while, he said, did I lose you? I said, no, Tom, but it's hard to talk when you're crying.
Yeah. 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 And it's, the whole thing is kind of beautiful, because I know one of your questions has been, well, what does it look like in terms of my retirement? Which even in your own mind, it's not absolute, one day I work and the next day I stop. So that God has now provided you another step of working it through with your firm. And they basically said, well, what looks good? What does it look like for you? So, you and April now can spend that time. What does that look like now for you? And the way I would approach it is, you're looking at God's will, since you've been given that permission, is be as pure as you can about that. Don't look at, well, I need to do this for the firm. Actually go the other direction and say, based upon where you are today, what it would look like to me to be ideal would look like this, and start writing that down, processing that. April, you need to weigh in terms of what do we want to do as a couple? What is our next phase of life going to look like? And then go back to the firm and work that through until you get confirmation, from it. But God just basically said to you, well, you two work it through with me, and then we'll go to the firm next, So you've got this next step now of God's will, which is kind of cool. So.
Right. Well, and it
It's been very
sounds to
cool.
me like he's also teed up a second question for you guys. Is he's spoken into being an ambassador for
Right.
people in the business world with Parkinson's, and okay, what does that look like? What's next, God, with that? What do you have to say? And I'm excited to see what he does with that as he begins to peel back some of the other and make space for what he wants to do with the ambassadorship. That's going to be a beautiful journey as well.
Mhm.
I agree, Kathy. And I also think it's just such a reminder. The Lord doesn't want us to be fearful.
No.
And most of our fears are because we haven't brought them before the Lord and let him work them out for us.
Exactly.
So by bringing this to God as a question about this and when to speak it, he just was so gracious at helping Ned see who to speak to first. And the people he spoke to first were so affirming.
Yeah.
I mean, Ned's biggest fear is they wouldn't want him there anymore, or think he was less. And they're like, no,
Right.
they're like, we'll do whatever you want, but we want you here. And that was just
love
such an affirmation for
Mhm.
Ned in this season. So I think that's the part that I've learned too. The things that are in our head that we worry about is get them before him. The Lord already knows, but get them before him and together, and have the conversations together about them.
Right. Yeah.
Kevin said to me, he said, Nedley, let me be very, very clear and succinct. We want you for as much as we can have you, for as long as we can have you. That's our goal.
It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Yep.
That's so affirming, right?
Yeah, it's beautiful. Well, we certainly are excited to your description of pursuing God's will together, and how it works really as a couple. And April, I really hope everybody realizes, the few things you said was, you, particularly as you're looking at some issues together, where, praying about what questions do I ask? How do we ask, seek, and knock? How do we get the truth? What truth do we know? Let's keep processing that truth, and then just like now with this announcement, not to figure it out yourself, but rather, well, we have an issue. I know I have a heart to do this. Father, how would you have me do it? And then he says, well, do it this way. And then you follow that, and we're obedient. And that's going to open up a bunch of now pathways to, okay, what's next? Particularly around, well, why don't you two now define your beautiful life? What do you want that to look like? And then go to your firm and say, I'd like it to look like this. And of course they'll cooperate with you, because they've already said they would. So, how beautiful is that? So thank you so much for sharing your story, and we're excited. We got to have you back on to find out what happened.
Absolutely.
To be continued.
To be continued, yeah. And we look forward to seeing you guys in October. And Kathy, it's been a privilege to have April and Ned, and just
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Your story is so inspirational to so many. And I'm just going to add in one little thing. This is the wife perspective in hearing your story that I don't want to be lost here, is the beauty of not only you and Ned walking together and working on the ask, seek, and knock, but you as his spouse, seeing the importance of praying into him having clear eyes to see and to be led, and clear ears to hear. And I think that is such an essential thing that we can do for each other, is just continuing, especially when one, like you said, you were kind of chasing behind, just continuing to pray that both of you are completely hearing and neutral. And that's a beautiful part of the process.
Yeah, it really is.
Thank you.
But thanks for sharing your story. Thanks for the inspiration.
Thank you so much. We wish
love
you well,
having you guys online.
We will look forward to seeing you guys again. See you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Come and See, your podcast for truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. Send us your questions and comments, and tune in tomorrow for more answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. Remember, God's will is best and none better. His truth brings peace in this world of chaos.